Hi, Lorna here. Hope you're all well. I'm here at this lovely park, and I'm just quick talk about the sacrificial event that I escaped. I did put a video up before about it, but I'd given too much information about the whereabouts, etc. And I realised that that may have put me at greater risk, so I have decided to redo that video. So rather than give addresses, names, etc., I'll just explain what happened. So it was it took place over a three-day weekend. It started on a Black Friday, and the Holy Spirit got me out of the place where the event was going to take place. I'll go into that later on, but that in itself was a miracle of how I was able to escape from there. So I escaped to a place about an hour's drive away, and was basically herded by vehicles, followed by police. I couldn't get out of town, no matter how much I tried. I'd get out of, I'd just about be on the road out of town, and next thing there'd be roadblocks. It was like the Truman Show. If you've ever watched that movie, it was exactly like that. And it was the most frightening time of my life. So there was a lot of dark occult, satanic crap going on. I, at one stage, even tried to get a flight out with me and my 3-year-old daughter at the time, and I went into the airport. It must have been, I don't know, like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And this has been like days of me trying to get out of town, and just kept getting rounded up blocked by cars, or like I said, roadworks, etc. Ended up at the airport, went to the Virgin counter, and the guy on the counter told me the cost of the tickets. Now, this is a extremely abused woman with a 3-year-old child in dire straits, and I think I was about $73 short of the plane fare for both of us to get out of there. And he said to me, when he said I was like that much short, I said, oh, please, I begged him. I said, please, I'm in a domestic violence situation, and I really need to get on this plane, the next plane out of here. And I said to him, look, I've got a $6,000 Commodore sitting in the parking lot. Here's the keys, you can have it, just please let me get this flight. And anyway, he said no, and he told me that I could go down to the other airline. I think it might have been, Jet Set wasn't around at the time, so it would have been something like Ansett or whatever it was, the other airline. And he said, well, you can go down there, but there's no one on the desk because they're all out the back having a party. And something within me said, they're having a party for your downfall. I don't know what that was, but it terrified me, and I just grabbed my daughter and basically ran out of the airport, got back into the car, drove off, and I decided that I was absolutely in hell, and there was going to be no escape for me out of here. I'd been through so much trauma up to that point that I had no self-esteem left. I decided that my children would be better off without me, and believed I was completely cursed. So I found someone on the side of the road. I pulled up and I asked him if he would call family services to pick my daughter up. And I forgot to say before that, I'd been pulled up by a police officer along the way while I still had my daughter in the car, and breathalyzed and spoke to him. And so yeah, I wasn't like under the influence of alcohol or anything, but I was under huge demonic attack at the time. So yeah, so it gets to the airport, all of that happened, and then I'm on the side of the road, and that was the hardest part, really, just handing my daughter over, thinking that I'm just the shittest parent in the world, and that I'm cursed, and she was safer with someone else, you know. So I'd done that, and off I went to find somewhere to die, basically. And as I was driving along, it felt like it almost felt like it was so oppressive, the feeling, that it felt like there was a UFO over my car, some sort of like ship, or I don't know, just a complete dark force over my car. And I, on the radio, played the Black Eyed Peas, Where Is the Love? And after that, this music came on, and it was like 100 trumpets playing all at once, and it was the most terrifying sound that I'd ever heard in my life. And yeah, it sounded like the best way I can describe it is almost like Tibetan longhorns, but all playing out of tune and all at once. So I was just in such a state of what the hell, literally, and looked for a tree, a big tree that I could floor it to and just take myself out. So I found a really good tree right on the side of the road, no fencing, nothing like that. I would have just, floored it to it, and, my logical mind kicked in, and I said, yep, that's the way I'm going to do it. And so I drove back. There was no cars around. It was fairly late at night. And I floored it. I took my seatbelt off and floored it to this tree, and I must have been 160, 180 k's an hour. So I wasn't mucking around. It was going to happen. And I get halfway to it, and my car just went pop. Something in the motor popped, and my car just stopped. It just stopped moving forward. It just came to something in the motor had popped, and the motor completely had given out, and it just petered to a stop. And I got out of the car. I was so angry because I really knew I was in hell and I didn't want to be here. I knew that I was under a curse, and that I'd had some sort of like a horrific karmic life that I had to live through and clear. I had a kind of a knowing all the way back then that's the majority of my life was clearing karma. And anyway, I got out of the car. Like I said, I was totally angry because couldn't even do that, you know. Nothing had ever gone right for me, and I couldn't even end my life properly. So I was extremely peed off. And I climbed through a barbed wire fence into a cow paddock. I'm out in the middle of nowhere in cattle country, and got a big cross on my ankle from the barbed wire as I climbed over it. It was bleeding. Went and found a bush and just sat under the bush, hoping I'd die, basically, because there was no one around. And anyway, not long after that, I don't know, I'd probably been there hours and hours, and I eventually heard the police looking for me. So they were calling my name, and I heard them rustling through the bushes, etc. And I was so terrified of the police by this stage, because if you know my history, I'd been targeted by the police for forever. And, you know, I had all that dealings with them in the Royal Commission and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I wasn't about to give myself up. But they did eventually find me, and they took me to the local hospital where I was checked out. They checked out the big X on my ankle, sorted that out, had to talk to the intake nurse, and they were like, okay, yeah, you're fine, and pat me on the head and sent me away. So it wasn't until the next morning that I had a social worker knock on my door, and she came in, and this is where the discrediting thing comes in. Yeah, yeah, so I had a social worker knock on the door, and she, when I eventually let her in, she insists that I go with her to be checked out at the mental health unit. And when I got there, I was sitting in the waiting room with her for, it must have been at least 2.5 hours, and I was saying to her, this is really odd, like, you know, why am I having to wait this long? Because there was other people coming in and out of that the unit, and they were going in to see the psychiatrists and all the rest of it, and yet I was still sitting there waiting. And so I eventually went up to the counter and I said, oh, hi, I'm just wondering what's taking so long, you know, I'm just noticing other people are coming in and going in front of me and all the rest of it. And the reception said to me something really weird. She said, oh, we're waiting on your psychiatrist to come in. Now, I didn't have a psychiatrist. So, yeah, so my psychiatrist, who I'd never had a psychiatrist, but yeah, I didn't know about discrediting back then, or this program. So we eventually gets in to see him. He comes in, and he's got no lanyard on, and there's no nothing up on the walls saying, you know, there's all different pictures of psychiatrists and everything in this room that are on the staff, but none of him, like none of his certificates. His name is Dr. Herman. No certificate with his name on it. And I questioned that. I said to him, well, how do I know that you are who you say you are? Like, you're not wearing a lanyard, and there's no certificates on the wall stating your name. And he said to me, oh, hold on a moment. And he went out and he got the receptionist to print out a list of names with his name on it. I thought, as I looked at it, because even the social workers, well, I don't know whether she was acting, you know, she's all probably part of it, but she was, I was saying, this is really odd, and she's saying, yes, it is very odd, isn't it? But so he came back in with this, like I said, just a A4 paper with a list of names on it, doctors and etc. And he points to his name on it and says, there I am there. And he was holding it in the weirdest way, like he wanted me to grab it, you know, like he was hiding something. And I just reached out gently and I said, so what's on, can I have a look at it? Because I wanted to have a look on the other side of it to see what he was like, what he was hiding. And that was enough for them to put me in for an overnight and to stamp me and discredit me. So, because before all of that, of course, I didn't have a diagnosis of anything. So they held me in that overnight, and I was put out into normal, the psych ward, into the normal area. I was there for a couple of days. No one even noticed me. No psychologist seen me. I never had a follow-up from that psychiatrist. Nothing. There was nothing. That's all they wanted. They wanted me stamped at that time. And it was all about the discrediting. So, yeah, like I said, I stayed there for a couple of days and then off I went. But while I was in there, I did notice there was a woman who came up to me, and she had this big burn on her arm of a watch. You could see the outline of the watch. And she was all zonked, like she looked like she'd taken 1,000 Valium or something. Really zonked looking. And I said, because I'm chatty. And I said to her, "Hi, okay, what are you up to?" And she said, "Oh, I've just had electric shock treatment, but they forgot to take my watch off." And I thought, where am I? Am I in like the 1800s? What is this place? It was just so bizarre and so hellish. But yeah, so eventually I did get out of there, and then I was in the situation where I had to make my way back to the property where I'd gone through all of the awful stuff. Because I had to do it because I had no family, I had no friends. By this stage I was so isolated out on this 100-acre property that I had to put on a face and pretend that everything was okay, so that I could get my daughter back, so that I could flee. Because I couldn't go without her. Because if I'd gone, because I live like 22 hours away, so if I had of, it would have been extremely difficult. So I had to go back and put a face on and pretend. I went back to my abuser basically and pretended that life was okay so that I could get my daughter back. So when I went back, in that meantime, while I was trying, to get my daughter back, I was being chased around with sighted guns. He held guns to my forehead. I was being filmed, like I've said before. That house was a trafficking house, and I had to just play it like I had to act basically that I knew nothing, and that just be a good girl and just do what I was told, pretty much. But God's when all that happened with the car and everything, I forgot to say that I did actually, when I got under that bush, I did get on my hands and knees and say the Lord's Prayer. And I have to say that God made things open up from that moment on, really. Because there was other support people that came in, social workers, etc., who knew about domestic violence, and they were speaking to me in code, basically, because they knew that he'd be listening, etc. So, yeah, they knew the trouble I was in, and not all of it, but they knew that I was in dire straits and that I needed to be rescued and taken out of there. So that was an exact 5-month period from that began on the Black Friday, the 13th of the 6th, 2003, and I left there with my daughter on the 13th of November 2003. So, yeah, another horrible thing was that I had to witness my pit bull that I had at the time being shot in the head in front of me. It was hell, like I said, bits of hell. But I'd already been a survivor up to this point, so I think that all that had happened to me in the past with home invasions and domestic violence and women's refuges and running for our lives, all those years had given me a certain kind of resilience that I was able to withstand that. So yeah, I was just glad to make it out alive, and I knew then and there that God had bigger plans for me. And just to finish up that recording, there was a few other things that I wanted to put in. So that the 3 days period was started on, so the 13th, the Black Friday, 13th of 6th, 2003. That was a full moon weekend. Also, when I handed my daughter over to that guy, he was actually a Telstra worker, parked on the side of the road. And I didn't just hand her over, I actually got him to phone family services in front of me, because by that stage I had no trust in anyone, so I wouldn't have handed her over to just some stranger. And I actually spoke to family services myself and told them that what I was going to do, basically. And he'd tried to take my keys off me. Fortunately, I had a spare set of keys, so, or unfortunately, whatever. But anyway, everything that happened was supposed to have happened, I guess. But yeah, I had a spare set of keys, so off I went. Also, when that happened with, when my car blew up and petered out, I did hit the tree, but at a very, much slower speed than I was hoping to do. But yeah, when I'd also grabbed a phone book from the property before I left, and when I was scooting a few things out of the car just before I went into the field, I came across that book, and someone had drawn witches' hats all over it. So yeah, it was just demonic. The whole thing was just absolutely demonic and satanic, a satanic ritual. The people that owned that property obviously were involved in all of that sort of garbage. So when I went the next morning with that social worker, before we went to the hospital, I actually insisted that we go into the family service unit, because I wanted to ensure that I got the ball rolling on getting her back. And when I walked in there, they told me that the owner of the property, who had 3 sons, had called them and asked if he could foster my daughter. So I don't know what the plans were, but that was all very suspicious. The woman who said that to me sort of jumped back at my reaction, because I just sort of went, no, no, not at all. They can't. But yeah, they could see that there was something much bigger going on. Also, just to finish up too, when I was put in that hold by that psychiatrist, there I had, on the intake, I had 2 nurses, a male and female, sitting there, asking me questions and trying to get me to drink this hot milk, and I was refusing, because I thought everyone was trying to poison me and take me out. Of course, I thought that because of what I'd just been through. But yeah, I wouldn't take anything from them, and I said, I don't want to talk, I don't want to talk about anything. So I told them nothing. And just the weird way that they reacted in themselves, whether they were just like having a joke at each other or whatever. But I mean, here's a terrified woman who's just come in, obviously in extreme state of panic and stress, has just been put into an overnight hold, and they're having a joke, you know, when I said, oh no, I don't want to talk. And they said, oh, but that's all we do here, talk and talk and talk. Yeah, it was just bizarre, extreme, and very evil, the whole lot of it. Anyway, that was a long time ago, and much more has happened since then. But I'm just really glad that, you know, that I'm now aware of this targeting program. I'm aware of SRA now. I'm aware that so many other people have been through similar stuff, and yeah, anyway, that's that little section of my story, and thanks for listening, and God bless you all.